number 2, Albany takes our money. This will be even more important once you guys, who here has a job, by the way? A part-time job, maybe? Do you guys have like taxes taken out of your paycheck? Okay, so this will be particularly relevant for you guys, and as everybody starts taking on jobs after you graduate, you'll care even more, because believe me, taxes are a big deal. I'm just going to give an example of New York City residents, sort of getting screwed by Albany a little bit. So if you think about the money that comes into the state, right? Actually, 50% of that comes from New York City. Where, there are a lot of people living here, there's a lot of business, there's a lot of transactions going on. So 50% of the state's revenues actually come from New Yorkers in the 5 boroughs. Now, that would be fine, except that this year, because revenues have been so bad, and the state government is facing a crisis, we're actually not getting any of that money back. So we paid it in billions and billions of dollars into the state last year, and we're actually getting none of it back this year, because the state's in big trouble. That's different for a lot of other localities. So if you were upstate, say in the Albany region, you would only have gotten a 1 to 5% cut. So obviously lots of unfairness going on, another reason why we should care about what's going on in Albany. Reason number 3. Who here cares about living in a democracy? Yeah? Who thinks democracy is a good thing? I'm looking at the people who aren't raising their hands. You don't believe in democracy? Guys over there. So I'm just going to posit that everybody here wants to live in a democracy. It seems to work pretty well. Obviously no form of government is perfect, but we'll do what we can. If you look at the Wikipedia definition of democracy, because Wikipedia is the truth after all, you'll find that democracy is defined by 2 main tenets: equality and freedom. And I'm sure Mr. Spear has sort of talked a lot about, forms of government, etc. There's a lot of sort of nuance here, but basically, when you boil it down, democracy means that all citizens have equal access to power. Each person gets 1 vote. Each person gets to cast it at the same time as everybody else, and that all citizens are equal before the law. So really important, right? That we all be treated the same. It's kind of a basic tenet of democracy. What you'll find, though, is when we're talking about the people who are writing the laws for us in New York State, the legislature itself is not very democratic at all. It fails actually on both. So first, not all citizens have equal access to power. We'll go through that in a second. And not all citizens are equal before the law. So our hypothesis, MYD's hypothesis, is that the legislature is not very democratic, and we have to fix that. We call this democracy fail. If you actually look for this Twitter hashtag online, you'll find some really interesting sort of comments, not just at the state level, but at the federal level and globally, what happens when democracy fails. So I encourage you guys to check that out. So part 1. There's a really cool sort of think tank associated with the New York University downtown called the Brennan Center for Justice. And they actually, have called the New York legislature the most dysfunctional of every single state in the country. So we're at the bottom of the pile right now. It's really bad. Why is that? Well, they're saying that New York State's legislative process is broken and that it deprives citizens of full representation in Albany. Sounds terrible, right? But what does that actually mean? What that means is there's 3 guys, 3 New Yorkers, who are deciding the laws for basically all the other 18 million New Yorkers who live in the state. So those 3 people are the Speaker of the Assembly, the President of the Senate, and the Governor. So the reality is if you had these 3 guys in a room, you could basically pass any law that you wanted in New York State. Does that upset anybody? Yeah? Don't like it? I don't think it's fair either, so that's kind of why we're here. But, it's great for the 3 guys, and it sucks for everybody else. Why is it that way? Actually, it's kind of not very sexy topic, but it has to do with the rules and the way that they govern the legislature. So if you think about a game like baseball, right? The reason why baseball works the way that it works is because it's a really sort of, strict set of rules that everybody follows, and there's an easy way to understand how people win and lose. The same thing happens in the legislature. There's a bunch of crazy rules that make it easy for people to understand how bills get passed. Well, the rules, unfortunately, in the legislature are not very fair. So the first one is that the leaders, those 2 guys that I talked about, the Speaker of the Assembly and the President of the Senate, they actually control the chamber floor. So what does that mean? That means if I were a person representing, say I were Liz Kruger, I want to put a bill on the floor that represents an issue that matters to me, say marriage equality. I actually can't introduce that bill and have people vote on it until the state Senate president says it's okay. So I have to go up and be like, hey, Mr. President, I'd really like to pass this bill, and if he likes me, or maybe, you know, like I bought him dinner or something, he's okay with like me introducing the bill, but otherwise, doesn't have to go to the floor. The second thing, which is really, you know, a problem for all of us out here who aren't in Albany, none of the discussions about the bills are open to the public. So they're done behind closed doors. They're up in Albany in these, like, you know, have you guys been to the Capitol building in Albany? No? That's a field trip, Stephen. It's a beautiful building. There's a lot of rooms with a lot of closed doors, and there's secret discussions going on every single day about, you know, laws that will change our lives down here in New York. The other thing is that committees and subcommittees, basically the groups of people that are writing these laws, they're not actually holding public hearings or discussions. So again, there's no place for us as normal New Yorkers to input into that process. And the fourth thing is, it's a little bit arcane, but the Assembly and the Senate are not really talking to each other right now. So in the US Congress, the House of Representatives and the Senate actually sort of coordinate a lot of the bill writing, because in the end they have to pass both houses, right? Right now, there isn't really that much communication between those two houses in Albany. Okay, well, so there's a lot of power vested in these three individuals. And as a sort of normal kind of rank and file member of the legislature, there's not much I can do. So if I'm an individual member, how can I stand up and change the rules? I mean, it's really hard, right? The reason that I can't do that is because of money. So in the end, it all boils down to money in politics, unfortunately. First thing is that when I want to get sort of funding for, say, community service projects in my district, I have to go ask the Senate president or the Speaker of the Assembly for that money. They have like a pot of several million dollars, and they get to dispense those funds however they want. So if I want to look out for the interests of my district, I have to be in, like, you know, good favor with these leaders. The second thing is that they control budget for offices and staff. So if I want to hire someone to, you know, go out into the community and talk to the people that I represent, that money actually is controlled by the leaders of the legislature. So it's really hard to push back against that. The third one is committee assignments. There's a lot of committees and a lot of power in being a chairperson of a committee. And then the fourth thing is housekeeping funds. So when people go and try to get reelected, there's a pot of money that sort of is available to incumbents. And again, the leaders of the legislature control that money. So a lot of reasons why individual members find it really hard to fight back against these really bad rules. Okay. So the second piece about you know, the democracy fail is that people in Albany often think that they're above the law. So here's a picture of the state legislature. I'm just kidding, it's not actually. But it's actually pretty close. There's so many stories about it that it's actually like really problematic. So let's talk about why that is. The way that we sort of describe that is ethics issues. So people doing sort of corruption or sleeping with prostitutes, all these things, sort of ethics is like the term we use as an umbrella to describe all those activities that public servants shouldn't be doing. So the first one is that they have this legislative ethics committee. So it's like a bunch of people who are supposed to be policing people in the legislature. They don't actually do their job very well, and actually they're all friends of the state senators and the assembly people, so they're like not going to say anything bad about their friends. The second thing is that as an assembly person or a state senator, my job is supposedly part-time. So 6 months out of the year, I'm supposed to be writing laws, and then 6 months out of the year, I can be doing anything else. So that means I can be working for, you know, a big real estate firm, or a law firm, or like, you know, my mom's local bakery, and then I can write laws that favor my mom's local bakery when I'm actually writing the laws, which is actually a huge problem. The third thing is that when people are running for election right now, it's really hard to run in New York because it's so expensive. So again, you know, if I'm an incumbent and there's a huge pot of money that I can get access to by following the rules, I'm going to do that because it's really hard to raise money and have enough money to run an effective election campaign in New York. So, Pedro Espada Jr. I know he's on your worksheet, so everybody should pay attention to this part. Pedro Espada Jr., here he is. He's a state senator. He's actually the sitting majority leader of the New York State Senate. So I wanted to tell a bit of a story, harkening back to last summer with the state Senate coup. This is a pivotal character in that story. He actually represents a district in the Bronx. Anybody live in the Bronx? He might be represented by him, I'm not sure. But he's actually a very key player in this Senate coup story. So just a few things to note about him. There's a long history of allegations of misconduct when it comes to State Senator Pedro Espada Jr. Here he is. He's very upset. First thing, he allegedly lives in a